Hello. Well, last week when we were talking about all the things that had happened in strata in Australia, we kind of missed out on all the funny, quirky stuff.
That was a terrible mistake, wasn't it, really? Because we love the funny, quirky stuff.
Well, it's the lifeblood of Flat Chat, I think.
And it's Christmas, and we need to be a bit more light-hearted.
Yes. So later on in this podcast, you're going to get a special Christmas poem.
Really? Who wrote that?
I'll let you guess. The Christmas Poet Laureate. The Strata Poet Laureate. That's who it was. The Strata Laureate. Then we're going to chat about some of the things we missed out on last week. Which,
okay.
Things like related to pets and parking and all those things, all those favourite subjects. I'm Jimmy Thompson.
And I'm Sue Williams.
And this is the Flat Chat Wrap. What were the things we missed out on that struck you?
I think it's been a huge year for pets, really. Pluses and minuses in lots of ways. There's been a couple of challenges at NCAT to blanket bans on pets.
Yeah.
We saw, I think the first one was the Elan building in King's Cross, which is a huge building.
Yeah.
They've always had a blanket ban on pets ever since they were built. And a man who really would love a dog challenged that blanket ban at NCAT.
Okay.
And he won.
And he won.
He won. And as well, at the same time, the Elan was also trying to prosecute a woman who had a dog there against the rules.
Right.
So we have yet to find out how that's going to play out. And then...
But they have appealed.
Yes. So the Elan now is appealing.
Right.
But just before they started their appeal, the Horizon, which is another huge building in Darlinghurst, a really prestigious building this time, was trying to...
Are you saying the Elan is not a prestigious building? Because I've already had their chairman on to me saying that I'd been duped by the pro-pet lobby.
They're both prestigious buildings.
Yeah.
All strata buildings are prestigious buildings.
Well, we know that's possibly not as true as we wish.
So the Horizon building...
It's a much more prominent building, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a huge building. Yeah, absolutely.
Harry Seidler designed and all that.
Yeah, award-winning internationally, yes. So will you allow me to carry on?
Please.
So a person at the Horizon, a woman, actually had a dog, a miniature schnauzer, and the executive committee were taking her to NCAT because they wanted to get rid of the dog.
Right. And possibly
her as well, maybe. But they lost.
Right, so the committee lost.
The committee lost. So this was a huge triumph for the pet owners, or they felt it was. But now Horizon has reserved the position. They can appeal if they want to. They've reserved their right to appeal. But they're waiting to hear what the appeal with the Elan, how that shapes up.
Right.
What the result of that. And that's going to come in February.
Okay.
And in the meantime, another building in Kensington, also in Sydney, a woman there has 2 dogs.
Right.
And her... strata committee recently changed the bylaws, obviously through an AGM, to only allow 1 pet per apartment. So that's 1 dog, 1 cat, 1 budgie, 1 fish. It's quite
Could you have one of each?
You can... No, you can only have 1 pet per apartment. So that was being held at NCAT at the same time because the woman has 2 dogs. Her dogs are 2 best friends, and she doesn't want to get rid of one of them, obviously. And that was in the same NCAT hearing as the appeal for the Elan. So I think that hearing kind of had some quite light moments as well. Someone said, well, what if I brought oysters, more than 1 oyster?
Well, live oysters.
Yes, that's right, into my apartment at one time. Would I be taken to NCAT? So it kind of got a little bit silly, really. But I think the lawyer said, well, it's about live animals. It's about keeping of them. It's the kind of nurturing and cherishing them and treasuring them rather than eating them.
Right.
So you could have you could have maybe 2 dogs in the apartment if you were planning to eat one of them, maybe quite soon, but not actually keep and look after them.
There might be different laws about that. I'm thinking in the back of my mind. It's something that occurs to me in this is there's 2 very different aspects. One is in the case of the 2 buildings they're never pets buildings, the question of the owners' corporation's right to set rules for their building, and which I think, as I often refer this to the Airbnb thing, if the vast majority of people in a building don't want to have Airbnb, why should one person be allowed to come in and change that? And I think the same applies to pets, although, as you know, I'm a pro-pet person, very much so. But I think buildings should be able to set their own reasonable rules. What the definition of a reasonable rule is another thing, because one of the rulings, I think it was the one in the Horizon, the member said maybe it's inappropriate for large buildings to have blanket bylaws like that, but small buildings could have them, which makes sense.
Well, I think the appeal that was just heard recently this week, it had 3 members sitting on the appeal, which is quite unusual because, usually it's only 1 member or 2 members.
Yep.
But the chairperson of the appeal was a Supreme Court judge who's the actual president of NCAT.
Right.
And the deputy president of NCAT was also sitting on the same panel. So they obviously realise that this is a really important case and it's going to set a precedent for apartments across New South Wales.
And across Australia.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think with such an auspicious panel, if their decision is going to be appealed, it will go straight to the Court of Appeal, which is obviously the highest court in Australia.
Yeah.
So it will there be decided once and forever, really, the principle. But yeah, you're quite right. I mean, it goes to the heart of strata democracy. Should strata buildings be able to determine their own rules?
Yeah.
Or should it come from government? It's a very difficult situation.
And you don't want it to come from government because governments don't get it. They never have got strata. They don't understand why people would want to live in strata to begin with. They don't understand the whole idea of community building. So I would rather that these things, I mean, for all its faults, NCAT is the closest decision-making body to people who actually live in strata, where you can go and argue your case as a resident owner. The other case, though, the one about, limiting the number of pets, that strikes me as coming from people who don't understand animals at all. Because one of the problems that we keep hearing about with dogs, for instance, is the yap, when their owners aren't there. And that's a whole other issue. But, if if the dog owner has to go out to work and the dog is left on its own, it is more likely to be lonely and distressed or bored or concerned by noises outside. If there's another animal there, because I heard recently about somebody whose dog was causing a problem because it was barking when they weren't there, and they got the dog a kitten.
Oh, yes.
And then they had a companion, and we have 2 cats, and occasionally one of them will be wandering around quite upset because it can't find the other one. They like companionship.
Yes, this woman in particular said that she's got 2 dogs, and whenever she takes one dog out to have his fur trimmed, the other one pines and sits by the door waiting for him to come home. So it would be horrendous to separate them after a while.
Yeah, but the whole principle of let's just have one pet, it doesn't make any sense to me on any level at all. I do understand people who don't want to have pets in their building. I get that. I don't agree with it, but I get why people would want that. The whole thing of limiting the number of pets and stopping the pet from having its own companions.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's just people who don't understand animals. They don't understand strata. They don't understand animals. They shouldn't be making decisions like that.
And also, I mean, strata democracy is imperfect, as we know, but it's probably one of the best forms of democracy we actually have. I mean, the difficulty is that times change. The demographics of people moving into apartments have changed. They used to be just, for single people on their first rung on the property ladder, but now they're increasingly families and increasingly empty nesters who want to move in from their big houses into apartments with their pets. And I think sometimes strata committees have failed to keep up with that. So you might have older, crusted-on strata members who want to stick to a no pets policy that they had at the beginning when the building was first built in the 1930s.
We've always had this policy and we've never had any trouble till you people came along.
Yeah. And the difficulty is when they have a lot of proxies, maybe. So it then falls to the people who want to change the bylaws. They really have to work hard at it and have to overcome huge obstacles often.
Yeah.
And they're having to raise money themselves to fight a campaign, whereas the strata committee, who are intent on keeping a ban on animals, can use strata money to keep that going.
Yes, and the other thing that people don't realise is that the difficulty, the ratchet effect of bylaws, it takes 75% of a vote to establish a bylaw, apart from in the very early stages, the very first set of bylaws is accepted by a majority. But if you want to bring in a new bylaw or change a bylaw, you've got to get 75% of people voting. And that means it only takes 25% of people who don't want change. So you may have 60% of people in the building saying, yeah, pets are fine, let's do it. But if you've got 25% of people who say, well, we don't want pets in the building, then they're actually ruling the roost. That's why you have to take it to NCAT. That's why one of the reasons NCAT exists is so that these arguments can be tested by people who allegedly know what they're doing. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what I think is the weirdest story in strata this year. That's after this. So, strangest story of the year.
Yes, I think this has to be the strata apartment manager who built an Aladdin's cave inside his complex, which he filled with hundreds of stolen items that he stole from residents, from their kind of their storage cages, from their lock-up storage cage in the car park.
Yeah.
And he set up in there, and he also set up a CCTV system from this little place where he lived, and he slept in there as well. And he watched all the residents. It's just really bizarre, really strange. And I know at the time we said, well, it was terribly enterprising, that building manager. How comes we don't have building managers who act on their initiative?
Oh, we don't think so.
But I mean, it's pretty creepy, isn't it? It's really quite scary.
Yes, it was down in Piermont in the Jackson's Landing area. He was the building manager for 4 adjoining buildings. I think they had shared underground car parking. And somewhere in the bowels of the underground car park, he used water tanks, cut them up, and had a little living quarters and his, as you said, his Aladdin's cave, his storeroom of all the stuff he'd stolen.
Yeah, he even had a laundry in there, didn't he? And a kitchen.
Yeah, that's how
cook his meals.
That's how they caught him. They heard somebody was walking past and went, "That's a washing machine going in there." There's a washing machine going where there shouldn't be a washing machine. And they had a sticky beak around and discovered all this stuff. And it escalated from there. And to his credit, when the building manager was arrested, he said, yeah, fair enough, I've done it, I stole it all, set all this stuff up. You've got me banged to rights, gov, as they would say on the bill.
We don't know the whole story yet, because he was able to, because he hacked the computer system of the apartments, he was able to duplicate key fobs.
All right.
And so he got into people's car spaces and stuff. But he also could have got into a lot more, really.
But I love the binary reaction of the residents of the building. And one group were basically saying, it was a bit creepy, this guy always seemed to be around. And I often wondered, where does he go at night? Because he always seems to be here. And the other reaction was people saying, it's fantastic, he's always here. Whenever the tradesmen come around, he's always here to meet them. So I guess it depends on whether or not you've been a victim of that kind of thing.
Certainly.
Yeah, that was a strange one.
It certainly was.
A couple of other things that came up this year. There was the resolution of, I think, a couple of cases, long-running and expensive cases, where people had rented or sold the car parking spaces to non-residents. And the residents were saying, well, you can't come into this building to use that car park because you are not a resident.
Right, so you don't even have access to your own property.
That was the key, because the people in the committee were saying, well, okay, you can have access to your property provided you don't cross common property. Which is, I don't know how you're supposed to do that, by a hover car or something. I know the building that I live in has a rule that you cannot let parking spaces to non-residents. I also know that rule is not strictly adhered to, but in any case, the High Court, I think it was the High Court, the Supreme Court, ruled that you can rent your car spaces to non-residents, and those non-residents must be allowed access.
Wow. So what about all the bylaws in buildings that say we don't want to allow non-residents to actually ever park here?
They're gone. They're illegal. They should be taken off the bylaw book or whatever it is. The interesting thing is, does the person who has bought a car parking space in a building now have access to your swimming pool and your gym? Because they're saying, look, we pay levies. We pay levies on this car parking space. So, we're contributing to the owner's corporation. Why shouldn't we be allowed into the swimming pool or the gym or whatever?
Oh dear, this is kind of leading into horrible territory, isn't it? Really,
it is very messy, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I think because you can't really set bylaws that say only a certain level of ownership allows you to have access to common property.
Well, can you only give them a key to the car park so they can't actually get into any other areas? But then you'd need quite a sophisticated security system in your building to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think that's one we'll see coming up again and again and again. We're going to take another short break, and we'll be back with a couple of other issues from this year.
And Jimmy, the other strange thing that's been happening lately is cost orders. Can you explain those to me?
Okay, this is something, and it's a couple of strata lawyers. I know one company, at least, who's recommending this to their owners' corporations, and they shouldn't. They should know better. But basically what they say is put a bylaw in your bylaws that says that you can pursue owners for costs if they breach the bylaws. So what then happens is you're accused of breaching some bylaw, parking in the wrong place or whatever, and you get a letter saying, okay, if you don't stop doing this, we are going to take you to NCAT. We're going to issue a notice to comply. And at the same time, we are going to charge you for the costs of $550 for our costs in pursuing this.
Can they do that?
No. NCAT can award costs, and they can apply for costs, but what has been happening is that I think initially the lawyers concerned have been saying to their owners' corporations, if you are going to warn people about bylaw breaches rather than just issuing a notice to comply, which is in fact a warning, add in that we will seek costs which could be up to $550. What some owners' corporations have been doing is saying, we are going to charge you at NCAT, and we're also sending you a bill for the $550 costs. So they've taken it a step further, and when they're challenged on this, they say, oh, our lawyers say it's okay, so we can do this.
So people then are intimidated into paying sometimes?
Well, some people are. You'll get some people who'll go, this is rubbish, I'm not doing this. Then they find that they don't have a vote because the chairman says, well, you owe us money, and if you owe us money, then you can't have a vote, and it just gets so messy. And the problem is, I have to say, it's these strata lawyers who are giving half the story to their owners' corporations, because the owners' corporations are saying, we've got so many problems with people breaching bylaws, we just need to stamp this out. And the lawyers are saying, well, put a scare into people, tell them that not only will you be looking for a fine, you'll be looking for costs. And then suddenly an overzealous treasurer or secretary or chairperson is saying, let's ask them for the costs anyway, because this is costing us money. And they're really, really, really not allowed to do that.
So I guess they think, the cost will be a deterrent to people, and so people won't start breaching bylaws, and it will make for a much more orderly community. But really, it's not right.
That's all very well, but a threat isn't a threat unless somebody's prepared to carry it out, and it seems that some of these people are prepared to carry it out as their default position.
So if you get a fine, don't pay it.
Unless you get a fine from NCAT, unless the order has come from NCAT, unless the cost order, and let's not make a mistake about this, if you are taken to NCAT and costs are awarded by NCAT against you, you have to pay it. But your owner's corporation cannot just charge you for the hassle that you have allegedly caused them by allegedly breaching bylaws. It just doesn't work like that.
Happy days.
Happy days. We're going to take another break. After that, we have our Flat Chat Christmas poem. But in the meantime...
Wow.
Yeah, a Flat Chat Christmas poem. In the meantime, Sue, thank you so much for all your contributions this year.
It's a pleasure, Jimmy, and I hope you have enormous success next year as well.
I'm sure we both will. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to all our listeners.
To both our listeners. Regular readers of the Flat Chat website will know that we have a contact with an allegedly fictional strata scheme called Dardanelle Towers. Well, this year, for Christmas, we have a special poem set right there. They've cancelled Christmas at Dardanelle Towers. The committee debated for hours and hours until they issued this decree. This year there'll be no Christmas tree. A twinkling fir in our foyer is definitely not okay. So the members have flexed their executive powers and cancelled Christmas at Dardanelle Towers. They've cancelled Christmas at Dardanelle Towers. We thought because the building's ours, we could stick up anything we liked. But the Christmas tree idea was spiked. Apparently it's not PC to have a fairy on a tree. Lady Luckby had to have her say. She said a fairy looked quite gay. But there'll be no tree or festive flowers because they've cancelled Christmas at Dardanelle Towers. They've cancelled Christmas at Dardanelle Towers. The flashing lights are a drain on the power. Then there's the danger of small girls and boys tripping over tinsel as they fight over toys. Mr. Wilson, resisting resorting to profanity, quoted bylaws and safety, noise, access and sanity. A bylaw and sanity? That gives me pause, because everybody knows there's no sanity clause. So a PC tree-free holiday is ours, because they've cancelled Christmas at Dardanelle Towers. If you enjoy these podcasts, and would you still be listening if you didn't, you can subscribe free of charge on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and lots of other podcast platforms. As I said, it's free of charge, and that means the podcast will be delivered directly to your phone, laptop, or computer as soon as it's published. You'll find links at the end of the show notes, that's the related story, on the Flat Chat website. And the website is where you go to find the stories we've been discussing today, as well as about 10 years of archives and, of course, your questions and answers on the Flat Chat forum. Just log in to flat-chat.com.au to ask a question or, even better, answer someone else's. Okay, thanks for listening. Talk to you again soon. podcast is taking a break over the holidays. This podcast is taking a short break over the holidays, but you can catch up on more than 50 previous episodes on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this right now. And the Flat Chat website will still be going strong, maybe even stronger than ever, with everyone on holiday and finding time to ask those tricky questions that have been bothering them for months. Log in to flat-chat.com.au and tell us about your highlights and low points of the year. And until the new year, have a great Christmas, have a great new year, and we'll talk to you soon.